So I think I need a little more air, dear. Could you open a window or something? So here we are. It's hard to believe we're on page 95 to review the page we did last time. And we are actually 2/3 through this book. I know it's a miracle. We did start learning it shortly before the first symptom, and we've proceeded all of these years, and now we're 2/3 finished, so that's very hopeful. All right, so page 95. So this chapter 8, is speaking about the difference between Kabbalah, Hasidus, or Torah's Hanefesh psychology versus conventional psychology. That's what we've been talking about last week. We're continuing. Okay. So here we go. Clearly then, of all three stages, submission, separation, and sweetening, Hachna'ah, Havdalah, Hamtakah, the stage in which the conventional version is most explicitly unlike its Hasidic counterpart is the stage of separation, Havdalah. So this is, we're going to really get we want to get that clear down here, the Havdalah, because that's something really essential. The middle stage. Conventional psychology, which is based on human intellect rather than on the divine wisdom of the Torah, and its absolute definitions of right and wrong. So this is a very long sentence with many interesting ideas. So first of all, conventional psychology is based on human wisdom, okay? Can't fight that. Not on the divine wisdom of the Torah, and the Torah has absolute definitions of right and wrong. And this is always quite shocking, if one is a student of psychology and religion and then become from, and oh no, we're stuck with absolute definitions of right and wrong. It's quite startling. Oh no, that's it. Absolute, and we can't, so conventional psychology cannot grasp the real dividing line between good and evil. This is why conventional psychotherapy sees no value in ignoring its anxiety. In its eyes, there's no absolute good to be revealed by doing so. Okay, let me tease out the point here. So, what does it mean, ignoring anxiety? First of all, I never knew it was possible before learning about it and learning about it here, really, in this book. I remember the beginning of the book, for those who were here with me from before the Tzimtzum, we speak about Hachna'ah is making the ego smaller. When the ego becomes smaller, the anxiety becomes smaller. The anxiety is totally a product of the ego. And I mentioned that I had this, I didn't really have a clear idea of what is anxiety, like intellectually. And then I suddenly was attacked with an attack of it when I realized I'd left my cell phone in the public bathroom with my Feldenkrais glass sitting daintily on the toilet paper roll. And I was already back in Bad Ayin, and I had to drive back to Alon Shvut. And I was filled with anxiety about how I was going to go on with life, how I'd have to make new friends with new phone numbers, and how would I find my way with all of my addresses? So they were so nice, all of these, you can imagine. And then I remembered that this was anxiety, and I could make it smaller, Hachna'ah. And then once it's smaller, there's room to separate from it, to identify with the divine soul and look at it. What are its physical symptoms? This is anxiety. What a chance to do a scientific study, so I'll have a much deeper understanding. So I really didn't know this was possible. So this was something that's an advantage of this approach, of Rav Yitzchak's approach to psychology, the Hasidic approach, the Baal Shem Tov's approach. Okay, so this is a classic example, the second paragraph here in 95. This is a classic example of the common human failing of seeking to skip directly from submission, Hachna'ah, to sweetening, Hamtakah, without undergoing the intermediate prerequisite stage of separation. This mistake is common not only in conventional contexts, but also can be among Torah-oriented individuals. So what does this mean? We've spoken about a couple of times, a few times in the last few weeks, the idea of Menashe being born before Ephraim, and Menashe is what was, and Ephraim is the sweet, making it all fruitful, sweetening it. There's actually a very nice definition of sweetening here on page 94 on the facing page, the bottom of the first paragraph. It says, a true sweetening is an experience of God's infinite light, penetrating and permeating all of one's being. True sweetening. It's an experience, doesn't that sound good? An experience of Hashem's infinite light penetrating and permeating all of one's being. So no doubt that is sweetening. We definitely would sign up for that. And sweetening is simply instead of seeing it as a trauma, instead of seeing it as a transgression, see it as a catalyst for growth. If we become deeper people and less judgmental people, let's just define it as a catalyst for growth. So the was can't be skipped. In other words, it's like, I want to get to the sweetening already. I want to get to the sweetening. Why do I have to do this was? It's so hard. It's so hard to actually, when it comes up in one's mind, to say what was. I don't have to relive this another time. It's not happening now. It takes a lot of effort, but we can skip that stage. That's a separation. Separation comes up in many different ways. One is being able to tell, is this... I don't know, I'm laughing and crying as usual. Is this happening now, or am I just, making it alive in my mind? We can't skip separation. That's what it's saying. The separation of good and bad, the separation of the past from the present, can't skip it. The temptation to do this arises from the fact, so now we're back on 95, the third paragraph, that there is indeed a type of sweetening in the submission stage itself. I'm skipping parentheses 3 lines, albeit in a subdued form. The force of ego is so pervasive in the human psyche that as soon as we begin to wean ourselves of our self-centeredness, we are consciously or subconsciously struck by our oneness with every element of creation. This is also an interesting sentence. Once we wean ourselves of our self-centeredness, is that going to take long? How long does it take to wean ourselves of our self-centeredness? It's so boring. Okay, so once we do that, this sweetens reality. We're struck by the oneness with every element of creation, which reminds me of a little joke. Here's the little joke. The little joke is, so the Zen master goes into the Crown Heights pizza shop, and the store owner asks him, what would you like? We have all these toppings, and he says, make me one with everything. So make me one with everything is a good flavor of pizza. So make me one with everything. Listen, is a desire. Well, we get one of the perks of weaning ourselves off self-centeredness is making us one with everything. Okay, well, let's go on. This can be a little problem with being one with everything, as we shall see. This perception sweetens reality and changes the individual's attitude toward the rest of creation from one of exploitation to one of concern, respect, or perhaps even love. So sweetens reality. So instead of seeing reality as something to exploit, that's not a very nice way to see reality. Instead, we feel concern, respect, and even love for reality. So this is we're weaning ourselves of our self-centeredness. Has a lot of benefits. We should make an ad. That was the rectifying the ego. That was the first class in Torah and Nefesh. I guess rectifying the ego is making it smaller. Okay. So the inherent problem, now the bottom paragraph, we're not going to get off so easy. There happens to be an inherent problem. The inherent problem here is that this revelation may result to an anarchy of values that can eventually lead to an absurd and even destructive conclusions. And we've seen this happen to people. They're one with everything, but unfortunately, they're having an anarchy of values. Can you think of anyone like that? I mean, It happens to people. It hasn't worked out well. It is all well and good to inspire to be at one with creation, but do we really want to be at one with, turning the page, starvation, war, disease, oppression, cruelty, brute force, terrorism, substance abuse, pornography, child molesting, I would add, emptiness and boredom, without a clear-cut means of drawing boundaries? That's the separation, is drawing boundaries. These aspects of life can claim legitimacy along with the rest. So separation of good and evil is therefore necessary to make this nascent sweetening real. Now, there's very good advice for any mystic, if you happen to know any young or old mystics. So first, there has to be the separation of good and evil. That's the separation. We can't skip it. It's tough. Because when we spoke about evil, the three levels, the first level is the Torah says, you can't do it, but I want to do it. It's tough. So we have to separate good from evil. There's no way to avoid it. Throughout history, this has been the fundamental and fatal error in all attempts to rectify reality, impel society towards utopia, or hasten the advent of Mashiach. Okay, so let's take a quick look at footnote 4. I have it circled. And this is where we got up to last time. So that sounded vaguely familiar. That was a review. Okay, so footnote 4 is on page 171 for the proud book owners in the group. Footnote 4. This is not to imply that the Torah's vision of reality is so ordered that it allows no room for occasional impetuosity or spontaneity, but that these exist paradoxically in the context of order. Before starting his Gemara lesson, his Talmud lesson, and all the students would laugh. And I heard from Y.Y. Jacobson that no one ever wanted to come late to the class because no one could tell that joke like Rabbi could. And if you came late, you missed the joke. So it was very good for attendance. You can see. Yes, I'm so happy that we're back online. I just feel like l'chaim, modern technology. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so I think we were on 171, footnote 4. So this is saying this idea of shtus de kedusha, bring joy into whatever it is. It's this is the way to do it. The joy of tohu into the vessels of tikkun. Okay, back to page 96. Only after the second paragraph, only after having established the boundaries between good and evil, and having become practiced in the art of ignoring evil, is it possible to proceed to the next stage, sweetening. The art of ignoring evil. What we've spoken about that in human relations, like we're really doing people a big favor if we focus on the good on them. I mean, it can be very tempting if they mach meshuggah, if they drive us crazy, we might feel tempted to focus on the not so good in them, but that just strengthens it. So ignoring the evil, I mean, there's levels of evil, like to be able to have the strength of mind to focus on the good in a person. Certainly if we're trying to help them, it's very important. Okay, so we have to do separation before sweetening. This is what all of this is saying. Only then can we begin to examine, identify, and expose the hidden recesses of the subconscious mind in order to transform the dark, unholy realm into light. In other words, we have to be able to separate and identify with the divine soul if we really want an honest appraisal of ourselves, because if we're identifying with the ego, then it's really not my fault. I'm just a poor victim. You know, whatever it is, it's like we need that objectivity of that separation of looking. And of course, it's good to have a good friend, mentor, mashpia, etc. Okay, only then, okay, we want to transform that dark, unholy realm into light. As we have noted, this is the mystical significance of how God created light and darkness. And Hashem called the light day and the darkness he called night. That is, he gave each its own defined domain, and there was evening and there was morning one day. This is only then, that is, only then could all be sweetened and become part of the unity of creation. So this is talking about having to make that separation between day and night, between day and night, between men and women, between making a separation. It's like we can't avoid that. There's something in modern psychology, like we're all somewhere in a blur. Is it good? Is it bad? But the Torah demands the separation. It's like, it's tough. It's very tough. The animal soul might be looking for a practice, a religion where it's not so strict. But again, there's this idea of bringing joy and happiness. The Baal Shem Tov was very big on that. The Alter Rebbe that's the Tanya. The Tanya is the first, depression is the first sadness, is the unholy sadness is the first thing the Alter Rebbe attacks. We're supposed to be happy. It's a mitzvah. Yes, so we're working on it, right? L'chaim, to true joy in Hashem, to feel Hashem permeating reality. Okay, so now this sub-chapter is called Permissiveness and Sweetening. Since conventional psychology does not possess any absolute criteria for determining what is permitted or forbidden, it must adopt the attitude of innocent until proven guilty. There is nothing inherently wrong with any particular type of behavior until it can be empirically demonstrated that it's detrimental, either to the individual or to society. Yes, so that's, regular secular psychology. Even then, the secular outlook would be hard-pressed to brand a censored behavior intrinsically or essentially wrong. The honest secularist can say is that given the psychosocial context in which we live, a certain behavior has harmful consequences. They're still willing to say that there's harmful consequences. Conventional psychology, therefore, inherently tends towards permissiveness, the attitude that everything is essentially legitimate. Okay, so let's look at footnote 6. We're going back to page 171. This is especially evident with regard to the sexual practices the Torah forbids, but secular culture perceives as a matter of preference. So this is, this is where we're not politically correct. We're not saying that it's just a matter of preference. We're saying there's certain behaviors that the Torah forbids. Yes, it's not politically correct, but we're continuing. We're continuing with our approach. Okay, so 97, the second paragraph. According to this secular outlook, the best way to solve any psychological problem is to be as uninhibited and unrestrained about it as possible, allowing the individual's natural desires as much free rein as possible to seek out their fulfillment. Then this is what the animal soul wants. This sounds, the animal soul is ready to sign up. Even when it is clear that these drives need to be sublimated, many streams in conventional psychotherapy will still look for ways permitted by society to fulfill them. From this secular viewpoint, the absolute value system of the Torah is virtually meaningless. The secular viewpoint. Footnote 7, back on 171. Important footnote. The sages state that for every forbidden sensual pleasure Hashem created, he created a similar permitted one, Vayikra Rabbah. It is therefore unnecessary to permit that which the Torah forbids in order to live life to its fullest. So just in case anyone was worried, we can live a Torah life and leave life to its fullest. It's an important message. It's actually, many people might not know that we can live life to its fullest, living a Torah life. It's good to learn this in first grade or before. Okay. That was footnote 7. In contrast, back to page 97. The permissiveness, middle of the page, the permissiveness mandated in the sweetening phase of Kabbalah therapy, which is carried out only after the preliminary phases of submission and separation, does not constitute a release from any of the prohibitions legislated in the Torah. So one can still, we don't need a release. We actually don't, it's hard to believe, but we don't need a release from the prohibitions of the Torah in order to have a happy, meaningful, holy life. Isn't that great? Okay, I'm going to just skip this next paragraph in parentheses. Though, let's see, is there anything in footnote? No, we'll skip that. Okay, then the second to the bottom. The well-known saying of the sages, one should always use his left hand to push away and his right hand to draw near, can be applied to the relationship between separation and sweetening. In separation, we use our spiritual left hand to push away, while in sweetening, we use our spiritual right hand to draw near. That's a quote from Sota 47a. So that's it. So again, it's there's things that we can't do. There's things that we have to push away. I remember learning from Y.Y. Jacobson that when the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in chapter 27 that these makshavazoras, we have to push them away with two hands. He says, otherwise, if we push it away with one hand, the other hand says, come back, come back, come back. So it takes pushing it away with two hands. So that's the left hand, the left two hands, the two left hands. Things have to be pushed away. It's hard. It's the yoke. It's Kabbalah soul. This is Kabbalah soul. I want to do it, but I'm not doing it. The Torah says not to do it. It's a big deal. And the right hand to draw near, all the wonderful things that we can do, have a wonderful time and enjoy Hashem's beautiful world. Okay. The reversal occurs as follows. This reversal, bottom two lines on 97. This reversal occurs as follows. While we are going through the separation phase of our spiritual makeover, we must remain aware that indulging in physical pleasures can be detrimental to our spiritual growth. True, the Torah allows a person to indulge in worldly pleasures, as long as in doing so involves no overt transgression of any of its prohibitions. At this stage, however, we are not spiritually advanced enough to allow ourselves this luxury. Although we are cautioned to avoid asceticism, we're not supposed to decide to go off and live in a cave, we are also commanded to follow the sage's advice, sanctify yourself, even with regard to that which is otherwise permitted to you. So to sanctify ourselves in the permissible. This is a quote from Gemara Yevamos 20a. The Alter Rebbe brings it down in Tanya. And I actually remember when I first learned this, it sounded what does it mean to be holy? It means to be holy in permitted things, to do permitted things in a holy way. So if anyone is looking as a hobby to be holy, it means it's good to define it. So it means sanctify yourself in permitted things. We must strive to abstain from the sensual pleasures this world offers, unless they form an essential part of our divine service, such as when we enjoy fine food and drink in honor of Shabbos, or in order to open our hearts to the study of the Torah and the performance of its mitzvahs with joy. So let's go over that carefully, because we like to. So we can enjoy fine food and drink, for example, on Shabbos. It's a mitzvah. Or to open our hearts to the study of Torah. So Tanya chapter 7 speaks about these things. Some sages would enjoy wine and fragrance before learning, so they could be more open to their learning. It doesn't mention what the fragrance is, but it's interesting. That wine and fragrance, and this is where in chapter 7 is also where it speaks about Rabbi telling jokes to his students. That telling jokes to the students is a good thing to do. I actually give a one live class a week on my back porch, so the virus can't take hold. And we're learning this book also. And this might be considered a joke. And one of the people, I was serving soup, is a kibud kal, they say when we give a class. You have to come up with some kibud kal, some light refreshments. And after the soup, I had tea. So some people were, bravely going to use the same cup for the tea, the soup and the tea, and others wanted to rinse out their cup. I mean, I left it open for each person to decide, but it reminded me of one of my best friends told me the story like 45 years ago. She was in some Zen center somewhere, an authentic Zen center. And when she arrived, she was given 3 bowls and a brush with a cloth at the end. And at lunch, someone would come around and put beans, rice, soup in the 3 bowls. And then at the end, after you quietly sat there and finished your 3 bowls, someone would come like with a big china, a big pot of hot water, and pour it into the first bowl. And then you would wash it with your brush, pour it into the second bowl, wash that, then the third, get it all. And then that was your tea. Like drinking the water was your tea. And her children still laugh at her that she actually did this, but why not? It's your own brush and your own. And then I read that in Brooklyn, there was some Zen center that they did everything is similar till the end, but at the end they had somebody come around with a bucket and you just threw your water from your 3rd bowl into the bucket. So they had kind of fried out. They weren't like the real frum guys. Well, you drank your tea. I don't know, for some reason I found this story very funny. So it's a Shtus de Kedusha. Shtus de Kedusha is, it doesn't have to make too much sense, but if you find it's funny, it's healthy, it's good. So I hope, I didn't mention my friend's name. I wonder if she's watching. She's mysteriously. Okay. So, all right. So after I've told you that, we still have a few more exciting minutes here. So this is chapter 7 of Tanya, speaking about enjoying life, but doing it to get close to Hashem. You could really enjoy all of the delicious, we're supposed to. And then there's, let's see, do I want to do footnote 12? Let's check. No, it's only the source. That's where it says Tanya, chapter 7. Okay, so jokes are good. Wine and fragrance are good. We have to be in the right mood. We have to be inspired. We have to relax. All of these good things. In contrast, middle of 98, when we reach the stage of sweetening and have extricated ourselves from the self-orientation of the unrectified ego. So finally, we've extracted ourselves from the self-orientation of the unrectified ego. We may indeed begin to savor all the delights that Hashem has placed in the world for our enjoyment. So that sounds good, to savor all the delights Hashem has placed in this world for our enjoyment. All we have to do to be able to do that is extricate ourselves from the self-orientation of the unrectified ego. Does everyone understand? This is it. At last, we've come down. So it's worth it. It sounds like really, I've almost convinced my unrectified ego to go along with the program because I'm very interested in savoring all the delights Hashem has placed in the world for our enjoyment. In this context, the advice of the sages to sanctify yourself with regard to that which is permitted to you means infuse your holy attitude towards life in all the pleasures permitted to you. So that's a beautiful idea. We have a holy attitude towards life. We want to infuse it in all the pleasures permitted to us. That's what it means to sanctify ourselves in the permissible, to bring holiness to all the permissible. Holiness makes life, it's not boring anymore. It's holy. We feel Hashem's presence, the real sweetening. At this level, all our deeds are truly and intrinsically for the sake of heaven. This is how Hasidic thought interprets Shlomo HaMelech's directive Know him in all your ways. Yes, from Mishlei 3:6. Know Hashem in all of our ways. So this is, so everything we do can be another way of connecting with Hashem. Because we've already done the separation of good and bad. We already know what's good and bad. So everything we do can connect ourselves. Could be for L'Shem Shemayim. Everything, L'Shem Shemayim. We should know him in all of our ways. And the sage, and here's a cute ending for this paragraph, and the sage's assertion that we will eventually be called to account for all the pleasures that we could have enjoyed in this world, but abstained from. They're going to say, why didn't you elevate me? The spark is going to say, come on, why didn't you elevate me? So we're supposed to elevate the sparks of joy that come our way. It's good to have a good time. I feel like part of my shlichus when we have young people for Shabbos and things is that Yiddishkeit is joyful. Yiddishkeit, being happy is a good shlichus, being a source of love and light and happiness, that being from makes us happy. It's so important. It's such a message for children that being from is a source of joy and meaning and holiness, and it's very cool. Oh, and this quote that we have to those sparks that we didn't elevate. Why didn't you have that glass of wine before going to bed? They're going to complain. That's from Yerushalmi Kedushin, Gemara Kedushin, that we're supposed to elevate this world, elevate the sparks in this world that come our way. Okay, now here's this, we have time for this exciting paragraph here on the bottom of 98. The Torah's sanctioned sweetening of life gives Hashem great pleasure, so to speak, because after all, he created this world as a vehicle for giving pleasure to his creatures. Now let's go, I like that sentence. Let's go over that again. By the way, this sentence, now I'm going to read it the second time. It's from the Eitz Chaim. It's from our guy, the Arizal. This is what the Arizal has to say. The Torah sanctioned sweetening of life gives Hashem great pleasure, kiviyachol, so to speak, because after all, he created this world as a vehicle for giving pleasure to his creatures. Now, this is very important. We might have heard this before. It might be new information, depending on one's chinuch. But Hashem created the world as a vehicle for giving pleasures to his creatures. So he likes us to be happy, to be enjoying our Jewish life, to be enjoying our Torah and mitzvahs. We're supposed to enjoy it and have fun. Yes? Yes, so that's good. This is also stuff from first grade. Everyone should know. Still, we cannot enjoy the world in the way that Hashem intended us to, unless we have reached the level of a constant awareness of his presence in our lives. So this constant awareness of his presence in our lives is something we've really been talking about since the very beginning when we were doing Hachna'ah of Hachna'ah way back. Was this after the first Simsim, sometime a long time ago? So the first stage is putting the ego aside and meditating on the greatness of Hashem. So right from the beginning, God is in the picture, thinking about Hashem. Even if we think about Hashem for 30 seconds, that he creates this world. I'm a creature. He's the creator. I'm a creation. He fills this world. He surrounds this world. That everything is hashgacha pratis. All the circumstances in my life are hashgacha pratis for my growth. So the more we think about Hashem, the more we can reach the stage of a constant awareness of his presence in our lives. It's a good thing to daven for. It's a good thing to think about while we're davening. Right. So let's read that. This is, I think I wrote this whole last paragraph. So this paragraph again is from the Arizal. If you happen to be visiting him in Sfat, have in mind that this is the Eitz Chaim, the teachings of the Arizal. Again, this Torah-sanctioned sweetening of life gives Hashem great pleasure, kiviyachol, because after all, he created this world as a vehicle for giving pleasure to his creatures. That's us. He created this world to give, he wants us to enjoy our Yiddishkeit, our living Yiddishkeit, our relationship with him. Still, we cannot enjoy the world in the way that Hashem intended us to, unless we have reached the level of constant awareness of his presence in our lives. So this is the story. I think I have 3 minutes before Nir's wonderful class. So I think it's very nice to send a get well present to Rabbi Yitzchak of us learning his book. So could those shy people there put on, I think I figured out how to take a picture with my computer. Come on, put on it's a get well